December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Before dawn, frost clung to pine branches like shattered glass. The snow along the narrow forest roads had hardened into a gray crust beneath the boots of German infantry moving west. Engines rumbled low in the darkness as columns of armor advanced under strict radio silence. The offensive had begun hours earlier. What would later be called the Battle of the Bulge was, in that frozen morning, still a gamble. One final strike meant to fracture the Allied line and force a negotiated peace. In the command posts behind the spearhead units, German generals studied maps beneath dim lantern light. They believed surprise was on their side. The American front, they assumed, was thinly held by inexperienced divisions resting in what was considered a quiet sector. Fuel was scarce, reserves limited, but confidence in maneuver warfare remained. Blitzkrieg had once stunned Europe. It would do so again. The plan, known as Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein, committed some of Germany's last operational armored formations, including elite Waffen-SS divisions such as the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard Adolf Hitler and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. These units carried the prestige of earlier campaigns in Poland, France, and the Eastern Front. Their commanders believed that speed and concentration could rupture the Allied line before American industry could react. They did not expect rockets. In the opening days of the offensive, German forces achieved tactical surprise. Snow and fog grounded Allied aircraft. American units were pushed back in confusion. At places like St. Vith and Bastogne, defensive lines bent under pressure. German commanders, recalling 1940, sensed the possibility of another sweeping breakthrough. Reports from the front suggested American resistance was disorganized. Fuel depots were captured. Prisoners were taken in large numbers. There were moments of confidence, even mockery. German officers had long dismissed certain Allied weapons as crude products of industrial excess. Loud, imprecise, wasteful. Among them was the American truck-mounted rocket launcher system, the T34 Calliope, mounted atop the M4 Sherman tank. Compared to the famed German Nebelwerfer, a towed multi-barrel rocket launcher used extensively on the eastern and western fronts, the American adaptation appeared improvised, almost theatrical. A rack of launch tubes perched above a turret, like an organ of pipes fixed to steel. The Nebelwerfer itself had earned a grim reputation among Allied troops, who nicknamed it the Screaming Mimi because of the haunting sound its rockets made in flight. German commanders understood the psychological effect of rockets. They had employed them against Soviet formations and during defensive operations in Normandy. But the American version was perceived as secondary, less refined, less central to doctrine. That perception would not endure. By late December 1944, weather conditions began to shift. Allied air power gradually returned to the skies, disrupting German supply lines. More critically, American logistical capacity responded with astonishing speed. Despite the surprise attack, the U.S. Army's ability to move men, fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements into threatened sectors began to stabilize the front. General George S. Patton famously pivoted the Third Army northward to relieve Bastogne in a maneuver that stunned German intelligence. Within this maelstrom, American armored units equipped with rocket launch systems entered contested zones. The T-34 Calliope, though produced in limited numbers, was designed to deliver a rapid saturation barrage. Mounted with 64.5-inch rockets above the turret of a Sherman tank, it could unleash its entire payload in a matter of seconds. Unlike conventional artillery, which required battery coordination and setup time, the Calliope could fire and relocate quickly. Its rockets were not precision instruments. They were instruments of shock. In forested terrain like the Ardennes, where visibility was limited and formations clustered along narrow roads, saturation fire could devastate units caught in movement. German commanders, accustomed to calculating artillery arcs and anticipating conventional bombardment patterns, found rocket salvos more chaotic. The sound arrived first, a rising mechanical shriek layered upon the winter wind. Then came the detonation, a ripple of explosions across snow and timber. Historical after-action reports from the U.S. Army during the Ardennes campaign described the use of rocket artillery in conjunction with conventional guns to break up German concentrations. While the Calliope was not deployed in massive numbers, rocket battalions and artillery groups provided concentrated fire missions against SS spearheads attempting to consolidate gains. On December 23rd and 24th, as skies cleared and Allied coordination improved, German armored thrusts began to stall. Fuel shortages compounded delays. American artillery units, benefiting from superior communications and centralized fire direction centers, massed firepower with increasing effectiveness. The U.S. Army's artillery doctrine allowed for time-on-target missions, in which shells from multiple batteries would land simultaneously on a single point, maximizing shock. When rocket salvos were added to such missions, the effect was overwhelming. German records from the period reflect growing frustration. The initial euphoria of surprise gave way to grim assessments. Allied artillery, one officer noted in a post-war account, was unceasing and mathematically precise. Another described the sense that American firepower could be summoned at will, as though drawn from an inexhaustible reservoir. The symbolic object that came to define this imbalance was not merely the rocket itself, but the sound it made. That rising metallic howl before impact became the auditory emblem of American industrial power. It was the echo of factories in Michigan and Pennsylvania, of assembly lines producing steel tubes and explosive warheads by the thousands. For German SS units advancing through the Ardennes, expectation had been shaped by doctrine and memory. They believed American forces relied excessively on material and lacked the will for sustained close combat. Yet at places like Bastogne, American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division held under siege. At Elsenborn Ridge, U.S. infantry divisions absorbed and repelled armored assaults. The laughter that had once accompanied dismissive remarks about Allied rockets faded in the face of coordinated counterfire. There are documented instances during the Ardennes offensive where German armored columns were caught in concentrated artillery and rocket barrages, suffering severe losses in minutes. While the phrase "vanished in seconds" belongs to the language of cinematic retelling, the reality was no less decisive. Units that had assembled for breakthrough attempts were shattered before momentum could be regained. Vehicles burned along forest roads, their silhouettes stark against snowfields illuminated by explosions. The 1st SS Panzer Division, among others, encountered fierce resistance and mounting attrition. Despite early gains, it failed to achieve its operational objectives. By January 1945, the offensive had exhausted German reserves. The hoped-for rupture of Allied lines never materialized. American abundance, of shells, of rockets, of replacement tanks, proved insurmountable. The United States had produced nearly 50,000 Sherman tanks during the war. Its industrial output of artillery pieces and ammunition dwarfed that of Germany by late 1944. According to wartime production statistics, American factories manufactured millions of artillery shells annually, ensuring that frontline units rarely faced shortages comparable to those crippling the Wehrmacht. In contrast, Germany's strategic bombing campaign by the Allies had degraded industrial capacity. Synthetic fuel plants were targeted. Rail networks disrupted. Even elite SS formations struggled to maintain operational readiness due to fuel scarcity. The transformation in perception among German commanders during the Ardennes was gradual but undeniable. Initial optimism gave way to recognition that industrial disparity had become decisive. Blitzkrieg required speed and supply. Without fuel, tanks became immobile fortresses. Without air cover, columns were exposed once skies cleared. The sound of American rockets, shrill, cascading, unrelenting, came to symbolize more than tactical innovation. It symbolized a society capable of sustaining war through mass production, coordination, and mobilization across continents. Documents captured after the war reveal candid reflections from German officers. Many acknowledged that by 1944, the war had become unwinnable due to material imbalance. Courage and tactical skill could win engagements, but not campaigns sustained by oceans of steel. The Battle of the Bulge ultimately resulted in approximately 19,000 American dead and over 80,000 total casualties on the Allied side. German losses were comparable or higher, with irreplaceable equipment and experienced personnel depleted. It was Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front. In the frozen forests of Belgium, where snow absorbed blood and flame alike, the illusion of reversal dissolved. The rockets that streaked through winter skies were brief in flight yet enduring in implication. Each launch carried not only explosive force but the weight of an industrial democracy unified in production. By January 1945, the bulge in the Allied line had been erased. German forces retreated eastward, pursued by armies whose supply lines stretched across the Atlantic yet remained intact. Within months, Allied troops would cross the Rhine. Berlin would fall in May. The laughter that once accompanied dismissive judgments about American rocket trucks belonged to an earlier war, one fought before factories outpaced ideology, before assembly lines determined strategy. In retrospect, the Ardennes offensive stands as both testament to German operational audacity and confirmation of Allied industrial supremacy. The SS divisions that spearheaded the attack were formidable, disciplined, and battle-hardened. Yet even elite formations could not withstand sustained, coordinated firepower backed by inexhaustible supply. The recurring sound of rockets in the Ardennes was fleeting in seconds but vast in meaning. It was the audible proof that the war's outcome rested not solely on battlefield valor, but on economic systems, labor forces, and national mobilization. As winter receded and the forests thawed, the scars remained. Craters in frozen earth, blackened hulls of tanks half buried in snow. They marked the place where expectation met reality. History often compresses such moments into simplified phrases. Divisions destroyed, offensives halted, breakthroughs denied. Yet within those phrases are soldiers who believed momentum was theirs, only to encounter a force beyond immediate comprehension. A torrent of steel delivered with mathematical certainty. The American rocket truck, improvised in appearance yet devastating in coordination, became part of that larger narrative. It was not the sole instrument of victory, but it embodied the principle that would define the war's end: the integration of innovation, production, and strategy within a democratic framework. In the final months of the conflict, as Allied armies converged on the heart of Germany, the lesson of the Ardennes endured. War in the 20th century was not decided only by daring thrusts or ideological fervor. It was decided by systems capable of replacing loss, by societies able to sustain effort across years. The sound of rockets once mocked became, in memory, the sound of inevitability. And in that sound lay a broader truth, that freedom, when organized and mobilized, could generate not only ideals but industry, not only resolve but resources. In the frozen silence after each barrage, as smoke drifted among pine trunks and snow settled again upon shattered roads, the echo lingered, a reminder that abundance, harnessed with purpose, could outlast ambition. The war would end within months, but the lesson carried forward into history, that laughter born of underestimation can fade in an instant, replaced by the recognition that power in the modern world rests not merely in weapons, but in the systems that sustain them.